Here's somebody who says, my son is a skateboarder. He gets lots of injuries. Currently, he has a broken wrist and a rolled ankle. I'm not quite sure what a rolled ankle is. I'm assuming sprained. And that's just like in the moment. He's recently released his second skate video that he made with friends. And in the video, and in promoting the skate video, there's significant film coverage of skateboarders falling, my son being one of them. Some sports are for health and getting in good physical shape. Some are for fun, and some are for risk. To me, that amount of risk isn't worth it, but to some, they think it is. And some sports are just certifiably insane, like climbing Mount Everest. And these pastimes are almost always driven by an addiction, no kidding, because they can't stop it. No matter how many times they get injured, they get up and do it again. They put steel plates in their legs and they get up and they do it again. Driven by an addiction to adrenaline. Sebastian Junger wrote a book years ago about climbing, and I can't remember the name of it now. It's probably something difficult like climbing. His books tend to have really simple titles, like he wrote one on war, where he said that, he climbed with a lot of these guys, these world-class climbers. And he said that every climber he met who routinely climbed above 26,000 feet, which is roughly 8,000 meters. And it turns out that there are only 14 peaks in the world that are above 8,000 meters. And so they actually refer to them as the 14 peaks. He interviewed a lot of these guys. He climbed with them. And he said, and it was fun to read. I mean, obviously I didn't interview him and try to get him to say this. He said that every guy was obviously trying to create or find something that was missing inside them. I thought, well, that's a pretty good description of imitation love. The woman who's writing about her son continues. He's just posted his film on YouTube, and I know he's going to ask me if I saw it. I watched the portion that featured him, and then I cried. What he does is very dangerous. Yeah, the kids who do the videos usually do just insane things. Each trick needs to be bigger and scarier than the one before. In fact, that's the point. I know that he's going to end up having lasting damage to his body because of this so-called sport. It's very hard for me to watch him fall again. I get it. I rollerbladed for years, which can be pretty dangerous, but not for excitement. It was just great exercise that was easy on the knees. But the more I did it, the more it wasn't worth it. The more I could see the risks, the more I occasionally got into minor scrapes. And I just gave it up because it wasn't worth the risk of injury. One mishap. How many orthopedic surgeon friends do I have? One smashed elbow and you pay for it for the rest of your life. You break a forearm, you can go back to pretty normal living, but there are certain things, if you break them, you ain't ever normal again. And I hear people say all the time that they have a passion. Maybe you can tell I don't have a real fondness for that word, because it's used as an excuse to justify the craziest things, not just the riskiest things, but sometimes some of the dumbest things. They have a passion for X, but they don't ask, is it worth it? What does it give me? I rode a motorcycle for many years. And one day I realized after I pulled into the driveway, I'd rather be alive with Donna than dead. I'd already had 2 big accidents, and I decided that, I'm going to die sometime, but I'd just soon not die stupidly. But you can't tell people that who are in these sports. You can't tell somebody who enjoys the wind whizzing through their hair and who rides a motorcycle without a helmet. Try that sometime. Go up to 10 motorcyclists in a row who don't wear a helmet and point your finger at them and wag it and tell them that they really ought to wear a helmet. I'm going to warn you that if you do that, you need to be wearing a helmet. They have to figure this out. You continue. I know that he's also seeking imitation love for the accolades that he gets. He loves skateboarding. He's good at it, and I can appreciate that. Oh, yeah, it's a lot of imitation love because I've watched these kids at the skateboard parks. I mean, the crazier, the nuttier, they have their own language. You know, it's so rad, or I'm sure that those are words that are probably 2 generations too old, but the whole idea is to impress everybody who's watching you, and you can't impress them if you're going to do something safe. I mean, that's just part of the deal. So they have to have more and more. It's not like enjoying playing the piano or playing a little, touch football in the backyard or playing catch. It's dangerous. It's an adrenaline rush, and they can't get enough, nor can they stop it. It fills all the requirements for the definition of an addiction, which always means that it's imitation love. Nobody gets addicted to anything but imitation love. You say, I want him to know that I watched his skate movie and I recognize that he has excelled in his skateboarding talents, but I don't want to feed his addiction to praise or feed him with a bunch of lies about how happy I am for him when I think that what he's doing is filling a void and hurting himself in the process. Kind of tricky, ain't it? He wants your attention, but he wants it for all the wrong reasons. He wants your pride in his being insane. So what do? You continue. What is a loving mother to do? What am I supposed to say? Yes, I saw your skate video, and then what? I know that it's not loving to tell him that I'm worried or concerned or that I cried. No, please don't do that. Or that he's seeking imitation love. That would be the worst. It would only hurt him. He'd feel unloved. So you ask again, what is the loving thing to do or say? Easy, because I've done this with lots of kids who do crazy things like this. You tell him the truth while, well, you'll understand when I tell you. But you can't lie. And yet, he wants your attention. You're his mom, and you can do both. So you can say, whoa, that looked really exciting. I could never have done that kind of thing. I would have been too scared. Simple. 3 sentences. So notice, you gave him attention. It's very exciting. Without telling him it was wise. You made him feel equal to you or better, certainly in that. I could never do that. But you didn't praise him. He's actually going to find it a little unsettling that you showed some enthusiasm, but didn't praise him or give him any approval for it. You didn't tell him it's a good thing, nor did you disapprove of it. So you don't want to do either one, and that goes just right down the middle. A lady who's been in real love for years. Took a long time. But she's learning some stuff. She wrote to a coach, not me. She said, today I'm grateful for a group and how it started out feeling difficult and then having enough faith to move over next to you where I knew I would be loved. Wow. Faith again. Sheesh, it's everything. She continues. It felt wonderful to have you hold me and have both of us laughing at the same time. I'm grateful for tomorrow when I get to be with another person in the group and practice loving her all day while she moves. I'm grateful that, and she names another person in the group, that this person and I are having more and more moments of great times together, that we're learning to be loving toward each other. I'm grateful that I have work to do, that I have a car to get me there and money to get an oil change to keep it going. I'm grateful to tears that I met, and she names another person in real love 3.5 years ago, and we got to talking. Look at the warmth and the family and the peace that all came from that seemingly small event 3.5 years ago. I am so grateful to have real love in my life. What a beautiful story. And then here's somebody who said, changing subject, I read a story about a 70-year-old woman who was blind and moved into a nursing home and loved her room immediately. She said, because somebody asked her about it, well, how could you love your room immediately? You can't see. How could you know? And the lady said, oh, it's a choice I made. I chose to like it. And the person who sent me this said, I like that. I have made many choices ahead of time to be angry, so why not do what this blind woman did and choose ahead of time to like it? Yeah, no kidding. Why not? Here's somebody who says, I'm in need of some advice. I found out that my teenager is hiding text messages, and I also found some that were completely inappropriate. Sexting from a girl. She apparently sent him some really graphic photos. I've tried to open a line of communication, but he's very reluctant. I have discussed character flaws of people with him. However, he seems to be very naive. I know I'm behind with my teen due to a very explosive marriage that ended 2.5 years ago. I'm trying to get back on track, but with 2 other kids, it's been hard to find the time. Does anyone have any advice as to how I should bestow the sacredness, or I guess communicate the sacredness of sex, and how to save it for somebody spiritual, somebody special? First step, make the time. I know you get 2 other kids, but you're not going to do whatever else it is you do in your life, at work or anywhere else, somebody else can do. You're the only one who can raise these kids. So make the time. Read out loud with them Real Love in Parenting. I can't tell you how many parents say to me, oh, my kids will never do that. I'm going, then you're weak and stupid. Children have no choice about going to their secular school. Pretty much every state that I know of requires a kid to go to school, usually till they're 16. I guess some states it's a little different. They have to. Well, if you have to have a required secular education, most of which you'll never use, I don't remember ever using trigonometry after finishing calculus. So we don't use our secular education in many respects, but we use our life education every day. And most of us get either no life education or, more commonly, crap life education. So we're taught to live in all the wrong ways. So it's up to you as a mother to require a life education, a good one. If you don't require a good one, the world's only too happy to educate your children and give them a bad one. Really. Their friends are only too happy to be their parents. And every day, upstairs from here in our living room, we had family meetings and we talked about life principles every single day for 10 years. I say 10 years only because it took me a little while to figure some of this stuff out. And read it out loud. And if a kid says, well, I ain't going to no meeting, and I'm talking about having it be the first thing of the day, 6:30 in the morning, whatever it takes, it only has to be, 10 minutes of reading, and then maybe 5 minutes of discussion, 15 minutes out of a day to learn how to live. Does that make sense to anybody? Kind of like if you own a car, it might be good to know where the gas goes. It's worth it. And if a kid says, well, I'm not going to do that, then it's really simple. If this kid's old enough to be texting, then clearly the kid has a phone, and you just hold your hand out. And the kid will ask you, what? There are certain tricks that you can get a kid to fall for every time. You hold your hand out and they say, what? You say, your phone. There are two things that a kid doesn't have a right to, and they think they do. As long as they live with you, privacy, nope. They're not old enough to make these decisions. I mean, here's this kid looking at naked pictures of girls at school. Privacy and a phone. They don't have an innate right to either one. So if they don't attend the family meeting, poof, you take the phone for a day. Or frankly, anything else. They don't do their chores, their whatever. It's a graduated system of consequences that you'll read about, ironically, in Real Love and Parenting. Second, teach a kid that there's an order to things. This is pretty important stuff we're talking about. So those of you who have teenagers, kind of like pay attention. And if your kids aren't teens yet, well, they probably will be if you don't kill them before then. And if we do things out of order, things go badly. Every kid knows this. You put on your underwear before you put on your jeans. Every kid knows this. Or you look, well, kind of silly. Cooking. You put in X before Y. Now, regrettably, I'm the last person in the world to be saying anything about cooking, but I understand that if you're making a cake, that apparently it's best to either put in the water in the bowl first or the mix, and you can tell how often I cook by the fact that I don't know which is which. Or you put eggs in before or after something else. There's an order. In sports, you learn the basics of the sport before you go out and enter a competitive match, whether it's tennis or baseball or anything else. It's the same in relationships. If you put in the sex first, you're really going to regret it because you're not ready for that. It's a level of intimacy way beyond what you're prepared for. And that's something kids can understand. You're just not ready for it. Now, you'll enjoy it, but that's not enough, which brings us to the next subject when you're talking about sex and kids. Addiction. I watched an interesting movie. I wouldn't recommend the whole thing, but it's called End of the Tour. Whether you see it, plus or minus. But it was about an author, a New York Times best-selling author named David Foster Wallace. He was really a very weird guy. He looked weird. He talked weird. He wrote weird. He was weird. But in the process of the movie, one thing that he said was really profound. He was talking to somebody who was interviewing him, and he was talking about the concept of pleasure. Not just the concept, the experiencing of pleasure. Only an author would do that. Only a philosopher. Other people just enjoy pleasure. They don't sit and analyze it. And he said, and I'm quoting almost exactly, although I didn't write it down at the time, I got it pretty close. He said, now this was back in, the early 90s. So that's been more than 20 years ago. He said, I'm deeply disturbed by how technology is advancing so quickly 20 years ago and making pleasure available in a way that soon we will become complete pleasure junkies. He said it's going to be like we're going to be sticking intravenous needles into our arms and injecting pleasure straight into our bodies. And he said, in the end, because pleasure is going to become so available, because it's going to become, the access is going to be so easy, he said, we're going to die in a very real way. We're going to overdose on pleasure. Wow. That was more than 20 years ago. We become addicted to pleasures that keep us from experiencing true joy. And that is a tragedy. That's what this guy was talking about. Like there was an experiment done a number of years ago where there were rats placed in a cage and there were 2 water bottles. Everybody, I think, has seen a water bottle stick in a rat cage, unless you've been sleeping somewhere, or rabbits use them too. And they sort of nibble at the edge of the water bottle, and the water kind of bubbles out, and air bubbles rise up in the bottle. They had 2 water bottles. One was regular water, and the other was water laced with cocaine. And the rats who had the 2 water bottles preferred the water with the cocaine, and they all died. All of them. And that's what's happening to our world in many respects. We are becoming so pursuant of pleasure that it's killing joy, because pleasure and joy ain't the same. And that's something you can explain to a teenage kid. You may not keep them from trying pleasure, but you can get the point across, and you can point to how their friends who have got themselves hooked up to an IV of pleasure go from one relationship to another, to another, to another, and fall in love and have sex and break up and have sex and break up and break up and break up. And you can use their friends as cautionary tales to say, look what happens when you have unbridled, unrestricted pleasure. Become addicted to it, and it screws you up, ruins your relationships. Those kids don't even know how to have relationships without sex. In fact, now the phrase it has been for, at least 15 years, we're just going to get together and hook up. Now, when I was young, you said you were going to hook up. That meant you were just going to get together. Now it means you're going to have casual sex, much like you would, meet at McDonald's and have a Diet Coke. Fourth, most important, this kid's got to feel loved by, guess who? You. So you have to do whatever it takes to find love yourself, or he's not going to hear a thing you say. All the other things that I've said, it's important to tell this kid, if you don't feel loved, you cannot fake being loving, and this conversation is going to go badly. In fact, it's going to go so badly, you're going to make your kid more likely to experiment with sex. So, just saying, your most important effort at this point is to find love in your own life. Separate subject. We talked about it before, but I'm going to say it again because it's so important. You have to have complete access to every single form of communication this kid has. You have to have every password, every key code, everything, so that you can randomly check this kid's computer, so that he can't erase anything on his computer, so that he can't erase texts on his phone. Kids love to beat you up with, I have a right to privacy. No, you really don't. Or I have a right to my own property, their phones. No, you really don't. You're a minor, so you don't. Legally, you don't. The risks inherent in the proliferation of communication, or in the words of that author I was talking to you about, technology, are far too great for them to possibly understand what it could do to them. So we got to help them. They're going to, of course, tell you that you're controlling them, which is why it's important that they feel loved by you. And they might still tell you that. And you go, okay, you can call it whatever you want to, and give me your cell phone. A man wrote, and he said, how long is it going to take for me to get this? You can just feel the impatience just oozing off the page. When will I finally lose my fear? When will I stop lying, hiding, running, controlling, manipulating? When is this going to be over? Oh, probably not till you're dead. Losing all fear, getting it all right, is not even the point. The point is joy. Enjoy each step you take. Enjoy each step you stand on, even if you're not taking one. Enjoy each realization, each moment of peace. Enjoy each moment of less fear, or even the occasional moment of no fear. Those really can happen. They become more frequent, they become longer. But losing all fear, possible, but probably not today. The point of real love isn't doing it right. It's joy. It's fun. A woman and her husband were here, and she had had zero love all of her life. Not a shred, no indication, no hint of love, nothing even imitating love. Her life was bereft of love. And she tended to panic and get angry and withdraw from her husband and her kids, and she was fiercely addicted to work. When she was here, she felt loved. And then love and teach worked. So I could love and teach her because while she was here, away from her addiction, away from the cocaine-laced water bottle, she could feel love and teach because she could feel the love. Then she went home. And there were some things that she still needed to be taught, but because she was having a much harder time feeling the love. Loving and teaching was getting harder and harder. There were principles she had to know for the benefit of herself, for her marriage, for her kids. She was just doing too many things that were causing too much damage. When I tried to instruct her, she said, I don't need instruction, I need love. Well, you need both, love and teach. But you don't trust the love I'm giving you. And I can't give it to you any better than this over the phone. So until you feel loved enough, you won't hear the instruction that can save your life. So there's a gap. There's not enough love that you're feeling, and I can't give more, so what's the solution? You trusting. We've talked about this on video chats many times. You find love, you trust it, you remember it, you share it. Well, she found it. She trusted it for a little while, but then she quit remembering it because she was drinking cocaine. And when you're using cocaine or narcotics or any addictive drug, it's pretty hard to feel anything but the pleasure, or at the very least, the diminution of pain that the drug gives you. That's the danger. Like I said, we get our pleasure kills our joy. And that was what was happening with her. So within a 2-minute period of time on the phone the other day, she said, well, I just don't know what to do, meaning with her life. And within a 2-minute period of time, she would say, I wish everybody would stop telling me what to do. That's how people talk when they're addicted. They don't make any sense. They don't make any sense to themselves. They don't make sense to anybody else. She's completely lost, but she can't be instructed because she's an addict. So the day may have to come when she's going to have to quit her job. Because as long as she has work as her addiction, as long as she's sucking on that cocaine bottle, she's not going to hear or feel anything else. She blames her husband for attacking her with what she needs to do differently. In fact, she blames him for telling her exactly what she agreed for him to tell her while she was here. And he's right about all the things that he's saying. Yeah, he doesn't say it perfectly, but what he's telling her is necessary. And I said, you keep blaming his imperfections. You keep blaming his anger, his antagonism, his whatever. And, sometimes he is wrong. But the real problem is your lack of trusting. How do I know? Because you do the same blaming and not trusting with me. Exactly the same. You say it that I'm picking on you and you blame me and tell me I'm attacking you in the same way you blame him. And I'm not feeling any antagonism. If you don't do what I'm suggesting, how does it hurt me? So how could I possibly get antagonistic? I don't need you to do anything. And we have no past history. So if you do it with me, I know you do it with him. Several cautionary tales already in this brief video chat. If we stay with our addictions, we're dead. We can't feel love and we can't hear the truth. Got to give them up. And if that requires somebody else to help us, like parents bringing a teenager to a drug rehab center, parents bringing a teenager here, a husband bringing his wife here, whatever it takes, the addiction has to stop or everything else fails. This is from a woman who was an intern for yet another woman whose name is Joanne, who came here for an intervention many months ago. So Joanne came for the intervention, and the woman who's writing was her intern, meaning the person who took notes, offered support during the intervention, and so on. So the intern wrote to me and said, I feel like what you're doing is reparenting me, like being a real father. Pay attention, everybody who's listening. This woman happens to be talking to me, but the principle that she's teaching is far bigger than me. I'm nobody, and I understand my relative place in the universe, and it's pretty small. Nearly all of us were destroyed by the lack of love from our parents. No accusation, no blaming. It just has to change. I've written about this everywhere. One of the examples that I've given is that there were earthquakes, and in Armenia and in San Francisco, within a couple months of each other. And the earthquake in Armenia, although the severity of the quake was pretty similar, within like 0.1 on the Richter scale, it was 1,000 times more deadly. No blaming of anybody, just it was 1,000 times more deadly because they had no experience with quakes in Armenia. They weren't prepared. They had fewer funds for building buildings. It all really comes down to just kind of one word, rebar, which is an abbreviation for reinforcing steel bar. Rebar. That's what everybody who's in construction calls it. That's what I call it, and I'm not in construction. Because of simple ignorance and lack of resources, people died because of lack of rebar. San Francisco was prepared. They had rebar in their buildings all over the place. They retrofitted buildings with rebar. They strengthened them to come up to a certain code. But they had to learn this at a price, because back in the 1800s, San Francisco had results much like Armenia. The city fell to the ground and burned to dust because they weren't prepared. Because back then, they didn't know about rebar and concrete either in San Francisco. Well, Armenia is learning just like San Francisco did. The codes have been upgraded. The codes got upgraded again in San Francisco after the quake, where really, relatively speaking, not many people died. I mean, 2 people's a lot if they happen to be your brother and sister, but they're better prepared. So now that we know the problem in our own lives, let's learn the lesson. Let's fix it. They did it in Armenia and San Francisco in concrete and rebar. Now we can do it in our lives. Find somebody to love you, to give you what your parents didn't have. Like now, like I told the mother who earlier on in the video chat was talking about her teenage boy who's getting sexting from girls at school. It will save your life finding unconditional love. Don't wait, do it. I repeat, it will save your life. This woman who's writing to me did that. She is unrecognizable. So now back to the intern who was traveling with Joanne. She said, tonight I was remembering Joanne's face when we waited for the plane in wherever it was they came from for her intervention. I don't think I've ever seen somebody look more miserable, that's before she came here, as though she was headed to prison or her execution. I remained cheerful and relaxed because I knew what she was headed for, or at least the possibility of what she could get. She told me tonight, a year later, how angry she was with me then because I didn't comfort her. Ooh, this is beautifully said. And that's one of the huge problems in the world. When somebody is suffering, we alleviate their pain. We comfort them. And that's exactly the wrong thing to do. If somebody has a removable, treatable brain tumor, what's the solution? Comfort? More pain medications? No, removal of the tumor. Now, will removing the tumor hurt? Sure, and it might be difficult, and they might have to have chemotherapy. But the solution is removal. It's not comfort. Now, turns out you can do both. You can do the solution and comfort. But the world is dying for a lack of love, and the solution is not comfort. Drugs, alcohol, entertainment, recreation, sexting, sympathy, technology, smartphones, victimhood, and on and on and on. The solution is love. Why don't we do that if it's so obvious? Because for most of us, it's not so obvious. We've never seen it, most of us. How do I know that? Many, many years ago, I used to theorize that 95% of us have never seen it. I have considerably revised my number to now 99.9 because I've had the opportunity to unconditionally love a great many people now, and had those people uniformly say, wow, I've never felt like this in my life. Ever. And I know at least 100 people, and I've talked to them about really significant issues in life, and none of them have ever described feeling like this either. Well, do 1 times 100 times 100 times 100, and in just 4 of those sequences, you're up to 1 million. The intern continues. Then, when she sat on your couch in Rome for the first time, she kept looking at me with pitiful, darting eyes to rescue her, like, aren't you going to save me from this monster? I sat there peaceful and just kept typing. Tonight, we laughed about that. We remembered and it just roared. It would be hard to describe a bigger contrast to our return trip when we laughed, giggled, and were joyful every minute. Her entire face changed. It is a miracle. That's what love does. Routinely does. Heals wounds and produces miracles. She said, but I realize now, maybe there's a lesson in here for me. The things that scare me so much, those situations that will come from time to time, might be similar huge blessings waiting to be discovered. If I live well and follow the principles of happiness, I'm silly to be afraid, just like she was silly to be afraid. And as I face the challenges, I can similarly be delighted by the freedom, the joy, and the peace of finally having a life worth living. And right now, this particular woman who's writing is going through some difficult things. I listened to the video chat again where you describe my life. I feel so wounded, and I could go into drama about how it may never heal enough, but why bother? It's way more fun to look to see what adventure is next, who I can love or be loved by, and what there is to learn. In fact, if my life had not been so bad for nearly all of it, I might not have been motivated to learn and grow, and could have smoldered in quiet misery or desperation like I see so many people do. It's so great to know a solution. It really is. And it's worth whatever we pay to find it. Sylvie's story. I think it's been a couple of weeks. I think Sylvie was age 3 or 4 at the time of this writing. And I'm going to emphasize, I don't share Sylvie's stories because I have a need to tell you about my grandchildren. I don't carry photos of them in my wallet, and I don't bore people with stories in the airport. But to describe what children look like, what they behave like when they're loved from birth on, as opposed to what I did with my children, which was learn to love them when the oldest was, like 19. It's harder at that point. Her mother says, Sylvie's a confident kid. She just says what she thinks, as opposed to thinking about how it might affect other people. That includes that she's also not afraid to express her fears, which most people would not consider a form of confidence. But it is. So Sylvie will say things like, or did when she was 3 or 4, I'm afraid of the dark. I'm afraid of being in a bathroom by myself. I'm afraid of going too high on the swing. So what's different about this from what most people do? Instead of reacting to her fears, as most of us do involuntarily, that's all we do all day is react to our fears. Sylvie, at 3 or 4, simply describes them and often asks for help with them. If I'd been that wise when I was 40, as she was when she was 3 or 4. New subject, woman who's been practicing real love for a year or so. And the more confident she becomes, the more she finds situations where she's afraid, which sounds contradictory. I explained that she's always been afraid of all of those things. But in the past, she was afraid of everything, and it had been there for so long that she simply had not recognized how many things she was afraid of. She hadn't recognized the depths nor the breadth of her fears. She wanted to know why her fear kept coming back. And I explained that to her a number of times. And finally she wrote, so what you're saying is my fear is always linked to feeling less than worthwhile. Because when I wasn't loved as a child, the only conclusion that I could make was that I was not worth loving. Yes. Now, how do I know that? Because when people do feel loved, when they know who they are, when they know they're worthwhile, then everything else just becomes information or tasks or inconveniences or whatever. But there's no fear. We have to find out who we are, which can be done only when we are fearless. Otherwise, we become nothing more than a bundle of reactions to fear. And only love can banish our fears. That's why it's so important. New subject. Somebody said, you've said that it's possible to become addicted to pain. I still don't get it. I don't understand how you could be addicted to pain. I mean, what could you get out of that? Could you explain it? Maybe for the 100th time, but could you explain it? First, my apology that I didn't recognize the depths and the frequency of this addiction sooner. Nearly everyone, like as in 99.9% of people, nearly everybody is addicted to making pain less. That one's obvious. Alcohol, drugs, sex, excitement, like the lady was talking about, skateboarding, whatever. But it turns out that you can become addicted to pain too, because it has its advantages. We get something from it. If it's not real love, and you get something from something, either it protects you or you get power or any kind of imitation love, then it is possible to become addicted to it. And the likelihood that you will is pretty high. So for example, if you cry out in pain, everybody immediately pays attention to you. The reward in victimhood is huge. I've written about it in the parenting book. You watch a little kid, a little toddler, and if the toddler has trained the mother, and if the mother was trained by her mother, the toddler will fall down. Toddlers are very fast. They very quickly learn that when they fall, actually I'm not sure if they learn it or it's got to be a reflex, because they all do it like immediately. They reach their hands out, and if they're on a hardwood floor It just makes a very loud slapping noise. Slap, smack. The toddler then looks around. I watched him do it on many occasions. And if the mother just even slightly crinkles her brow, the kid will scream. If the kid falls on the floor, and I've looked from like the next room, and there's nobody around, the kid just gets up and runs on. We learn that everybody pays attention to us if we scream pain. Second, when you can get people to pay attention to you, that's the very definition of power. And if you can't get attention with competence or sexual attractiveness or money or any of the other forms of imitation love, well then pain will do. It's very powerful. I once had a lady in my office many years ago who was just making a fuss. She had a kind of an unusual disorder that can be extraordinarily painful, and the solution to the disorder was a very simple laser procedure that causes less pain than an injection in your arm with a needle. Nothing, just nothing. It's one of the fastest cures in medicine. So I went to put her up to the laser machine so that we could do this. And I explained to her she wasn't retarded. She didn't have cerebral palsy, so she couldn't hold her head there. No, she was quite alert, screaming and yelling, but quite alert. And at one point she thrashed so much that she actually threw herself off the stool that was sitting in front of the laser machine. I'd never seen anybody do that before. In all my years, I'd never seen anybody fall off a stool in the office. And I reached down to pick her up. And as I reached down, my head went under the table of the laser so that for a moment, she could look me in the eye and nobody could see her looking at me. And she winked at me. I wish we'd had smartphones with little cameras back then. I wanted to stand up and say, "Did you see that? This woman is playing all of you." I learned later that this woman owns her family. There were 12 family members in the room. I've never done a laser procedure with that many people in the room, but they all insisted on being there. And she insisted that they be there because she was getting all the attention in the world. And she had been owning her family with pain for years. She would just make a little squeak like a mouse and the entire family would come running. From the next valley, they'd come running. So that's a lot of power from pain. Pain also provides us a lot of drama and excitement, which is another way of getting power over other people. And if you got no life, if you've been in pain for a long time, you get to the place where you just numb out. You just kind of disappear. And in the moments that you increase your pain, or that your pain increases through no fault of yours, you feel a little more alive. Who would have thought you could be addicted to that? But that's the circumstance that cutters fall into, or as they're sometimes referred to in psychological literature, self-mutilators. But it's, usually girls, but some guys who cut their arms, shoulders, legs, thighs, usually in horizontal, meticulously parallel cuts. It gives them a sense of being alive, and they become addicted to the feeling. So who would have thought that we could get that much out of pain? And that's just a partial list. A boyfriend wrote me that, or actually did she call me? Can't remember. Boyfriend was at his girlfriend's house, and her journal was lying out on the counter. And he read parts of it while she was in the next room doing whatever. Who knows? Probably skateboarding. She called and she said, "How should I feel about this?" The fact that, he read parts of my journal while I was in the next room. Now, in the first place, this is beautiful because she asked what would be a wise and appropriate way to feel about this, as opposed to simply reacting and dramatizing and being offended and making him feel guilty and going on and on as most people would do. So he happened to be on the call. Well, it happened to be. They both chose to be on the call. It wasn't like he was accidentally there. And I said to him, why did you read her journal? He said, I was curious. I said, no, not even close. That's not even close enough to a reason. I'm curious what it would be like to live in base camp at the foot of Mount Everest, but I'm not curious enough to go there. So curiosity alone is, I'm curious what it would be like to be a shrimp, at the bottom of the Pacific. But I'm not going to make efforts to figure out what that would actually feel like. So it's not curiosity. What's the real reason that you read her journal? He shrugged. He didn't know. Well, a couple of reasons that I can think of. Power. Information is power. It's the whole reason that the espionage, both government and corporate world, exists. We gather information to protect ourselves ahead of time and to gain an advantage over other people. By reading her journal, you'd have the power to increase possibly the strength of your relationship. Potentially, that could be a good thing. Maybe. We'll get there in a second. And the power to protect yourself and to manage the relationship, to control it. Second reason. False intimacy. By reading her journal, you're stealing kind of a part of her soul. And there's kind of an excitement to that. That, back to the question of the lady who said, how do I teach I think the word she used was sacredness of sex to a kid who's getting, sexual images on his phone from some girl at school. That's what sex does early in a relationship. It steals intimacy. It skips the work of intimacy. And the price of the theft can be pretty high because you're building a building without a foundation. So those would be some of the reasons. I don't need to tell you whether it was a good idea or not. All you asked for were what were the reasons. I saw a sign the other day. One of those signs that, people are always sending you by email because they saw some cute sign someplace. You wonder whether they actually saw the sign or did they just create the sign. And it said this: teenagers, ! Tired of being harassed by your stupid parents? Act now. 2! Move out. Get a job. Pay your own bills. And do it while you still know everything. I would suggest that we could make a similar sign for adults. Adults, are you tired of the constant inconvenience of being around stupid people? Are you tired of being nagged, annoyed, victimized, and angry? Act now. Grow up. Get a life of your own. Learn to see the needs of somebody other than yourself. Learn to love people instead of waiting for them to serve you or hurt you. And do it before you're so stuck in your ways that you can't change. Most adults are not a whole lot different from kids, teenagers specifically. 16-year-old kid called me and he said, I cannot motivate myself to study. And I'm thinking, you ain't the only one. I know 50-year-old people who can't motivate themselves to get up off the couch. He said, my parents push me, my teachers yell at me, everybody tells me that if I don't study, I won't get into a good school, I won't get a good job, and I'll be a failure. And yeah, I've heard all those motivations, and they just don't last very long, do they? And he was surprised. He thought I would join in the chorus and tell him that he just had to buck up and motivate himself. Here is why you don't study, I said. When you screw up, how do your parents behave? Without even pausing, I was looking at him on Skype. He went like this. He sighed, just like that. I said, and how does that feel? And he said, it feels terrible. And no matter how you try, no matter how good your grades are or what you do, the next time you screw up, what happens? And he went, see, there's your reason. No matter what you do, it never succeeds in removing the disapproval, not permanently, and it certainly doesn't make you genuinely happy. You don't look genuinely happy. He said, no, I'm really not. I said, so you study to pass a test, you study to please your teacher, you study to avoid disapproval, and that ain't working. So, what works? What's enough motivation? Why do children play out on a schoolyard? Why do they play? Do we have to motivate them? Do we have to order them? Do we have to make them? Why do children investigate things? Let a crawling kid loose in a new house if you want to see the definition of curiosity. When our new little grandchildren come over here, holy smokes, either we have to childproof the house or we have to put the kid on a floor that's been, meaning one of the 3 floors of the house that's been childproof, or somebody has to be assigned to track the kid because they investigate everything. They look at everything. They find things. If you want to find something that you lost 20 years ago, just set a crawling kid loose on the floor and he'll find it. Why do they do that? Because 1, they enjoy it, and 2, because it's a natural expression of who they are. They're naturally curious. They want to investigate. So I said to the kid, the teenager, how does this apply to you? When you were younger, I'm guessing that you like to read. He said, I did. How did you know that? It's a feeling. I'm old. I know stuff. He said, I did like to read. I said, why did you do it? He said, because I liked it. How about now? He went, not so much. Why? He said, because now I have to. So all this have to has actually demotivated you. So what's the solution? I'm not telling you this is going to be easy. I'm saying this to the kid. I'm not telling you you're going to accomplish this in a second because most adults can't do it. You do it for you. You study because you enjoy the knowledge. Now, he's going, but I don't enjoy the knowledge. No, I got that. We've established that you don't enjoy the knowledge because you're made to do it. So I said, if your parents were listening to me, they probably wouldn't like this. I said, the solution is screw them. Forget everybody else. Stopping the noise. Forget doing this for everybody else. Study because you enjoy the knowledge. But there's a trick here. You won't discover you enjoy it until you do it for you. So it's kind of a catch-22, isn't it? You won't enjoy it until you do it for yourself, and you won't do it for yourself until you enjoy it. So how do you do this? You just practice. Just try it. Just in your mind go, I don't care what everybody thinks. So I'm going to read this chapter just to see what's in it. Just for kicks, for fun, not for anybody else. You can do that. Just do it for 1 week. Don't care what anybody says. Don't care what your grades are. Actually, he smiled because he says, I think I can manage to bring myself not to care. Good for you. And as it becomes fun, you'll do it because you want to. You'll do it because you'll discover that your confidence grows. You'll discover that doors open to you. Once you learn one thing, it's easier to learn the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. And the more you learn, the more you understand the next thing you read. I can read quite a variety of subjects. I can pick up a book on almost anything and understand what they're talking about because I've read so many books before that. I can talk about a great number of subjects because I was curious and satisfied my own curiosity. Now, secondarily, it also opens doors to your future and your career, but right now we're not going to care about that. We're going to do it for fun. You know what's cool? He got it. He said, I can do that. Now we'll see. He's going to report back to me in, I don't know, I said a week. That was several days ago. So in a couple of days, he's going to report back and tell me how it went. We got to find an intrinsic motivation that'll keep us going. We do that. We will do that as we find love and trust it and remember it and share love with others, because then life becomes fun. And it becomes fun because we feel and share love. And once it becomes fun doing that, lots of other things become fun too. Studying whatever it is it turns out you like. Anthropology, whatever. That's what we're here for, is to have fun. We follow that formula, it's a lock. It's a guarantee. See you in a week.